Okay, we're going to be painting this house, the White House, with the reflection. Here we have a line drawing of the whole composition. Um, Notice that the house is actually on the law third, so the composition is pretty good. You know, before you ever do a painting, you want to kind of assess all your values, your colors first. And here I'm looking at the shadows. I'm looking at the all the greens. So basically, what we want to do is we want to mix the green to the shadow area. As you can see, it's cool, so we want to go very cool. That color right there is Viridian Green, Ultramarine Blue, and Burnt Umber. Okay, so that's going to be our dark green. There's a second green, which is going to be Sap Green, and the third green is going to be Sap Green with a mixture of cadmium yellow. So you see I'm mixing all my colors before I start. Now here is my, to the right, picture right, is going to be the Burnt Sienna, and to the left, the darker brown was Burnt Umber. Now I want these colors to warm those areas, or just inject a little bit of warmth in there. The sky color was, I believe it was just a little bit of cerulean blue and ultramarine blue. You can put any blue up there. Really don't really see it that much, so it's not important to the painting at all. It just breaks up the tree shapes a little bit. So now I'm carefully going over my shapes as best I can. I am putting the paint down. This is not wet into wet. This is wet on dry, right? Because I want to create these shapes. I want to make sure that the paint is not running into other areas that I don't want, specifically the house. That would have been a mess. So we want to try to stay away from putting any of the green into the house area at all. So this is basically that's the background color. So again, it's the it's that dark mixture that I mentioned in the beginning, which is Viridian Green, Burnt Umber, Ultramarine Blue. Very dark. Try to make it as thick as you possibly can make it. Right? It's still going to dry lighter. We know that. So we don't want to do this more than once. Right? So if you can get your first initial wash as dark as possible, that's half the battle. Plus, you won't have to be going back over things and overlaying the painting. Not that that would make it overworked. I've done things where I had to go over 4 times to get the right value. But the idea is to try to make it look like it's fresh, you know. So, but sometimes we keep going over and over and over, and we overbrush. And when we overbrush, we actually lift the paint off the paper. So be careful when you put the paint, like, for instance, if you're going back over an area. By the way, this is sap green that I'm using now. So it's sap green. You could actually see the sap green. You can see the areas where it's a little bit more yellow. That's the sap green and yellow combination, right? So you have to really just follow the picture, right? If the grass is obviously yellow, it's yellow green, not green yellow. You gotta respond to those colors, right? So keep that in mind as you're painting, right? So now there's a stone wall. That's going to be our Burnt Umber and Ultramarine Blue, a little bit more Ultramarine Blue, because everything in the shadow is cool. So we got to keep that in mind. Now I think I did spray a little, just a little spray of water over that area, actually over the whole top, just to keep it workable, right? Because I want to still drop in color in the shadow areas just to get them deeper. Like right in here, you can almost see slightly soft edges because that whole top is still kind of wet. Now, if it's creating weird shapes like the cabbages, give it a little spray. Once you spray it, that not totally dry area is going to get wet again quicker, right? So it's when cabbages only happen is when the previous wash is not totally dry and it's not totally wet. All right, so the tree. Basically, when you look at tree trunks in nature, they're not going to be they're not brown, right? They're going to be gray, especially in the shadows. Now I'm adding a little bit of burnt sienna and a tiny bit of cadmium orange. I wanted to get that color to be a little brighter because that's indicating that the sun is hitting those branches up top, okay? And I'm going to go back in there and put the dark sides in and every like I'm doing now. That dark side, again, is just the burnt umber and ultramarine blue. Again, a little bit more ultramarine blue because the blue is the shadow color, the dominating shadow color, as is in here. Now the house, we got ultramarine blue. I did put a touch of alizarin crimson in there. It almost has like a purplish feel to it. And I went around, softened some of the edges. Those are the dappled, I call them Renoir shadows, right? Because Auguste Renoir's paintings always had that kind of misty shadow diffusion kind of thing going on. And that's what we're trying to do there. So moving right along, I'm putting another wash on the house. I think I was just drying that there. Okay. Distraction here. So now we have, let's see, the next color I think we still go back into the tree areas, and that's not completely done. The grass is yellow with a little bit of sap green, and I think I added a touch of orange to it. If I didn't add it now, I'll add it later, but you can put it in as the first wash because you really want that grass to look like it's, probably sunburnt or whatever. But if you want to keep it bright green, that's fine too. You can just use more sap green, sap to yellow, cadmium yellow, and you'll be fine. Let's see. So, the chimneys, they're going to be cadmium orange and a little touch of burnt sienna. The shadows are going to be burnt umber in there. So the roof itself is burnt sienna with a little bit of alizarin crimson. And there's more than likely there was probably just a touch of blue or something in there. That wasn't clean. I'm talking about the roof now. And that shadow on the roof was basically burnt umber and ultramarine blue. It was something neutral. And that's going to be darker. That little outcropping part of the house, that roof was burnt umber and ultramarine blue. Again, a little bit more on the ultramarine blue. Now these sides, I'm just putting some smaller shapes. I'm not calling them details because they're really not details. When you look at how far those trees are away, these are just smaller shapes. So instead of saying detail, we're just working smaller because those shapes in the background are further away. So we want to make our brush strokes in the same proportion as what's happening in the picture. The larger strokes we can leave to the front. The smaller strokes we work on in the back. Now, the telephone, I don't know why, but I'm obsessing over the telephone pole. I did want to get it a little straighter. I think it was kind of losing itself in the background. So I scrubbed it out, and then I just put a little bit of burnt sienna on the telephone pole. The greens that you see that are brighter, those are more of, or this green in particular, that's sap green. Now you're going to see that I'm going to go back over that and start getting that to set back a little bit. We're talking about these bushes in here, right there, okay? And then I'm going to add a little bit more dark, right? What I'm doing right now. That's basically the same wash I had originally, and that's burnt umber, ultramarine blue, and viridian green, at a very, very concentrated mixture, okay? So you want this stuff to be as dark as ink. Now, did I go over that a few times? Yeah, you could say I probably went over it maybe two, but the first wash was really the base wash, and that's basically the lighter wash, right? So your first wash is always the lightest wash. I don't care how dark you get it, it's going to dry lighter. So, and that's going to indicate the leaf shapes that are inset into those shadow spaces. All right, now let's see. We have more. I think I start working on the front because I think we're pretty much done. So now here we go. Cadmium yellow, sap green. That's it. This is going to be our now the sap green here. I warmed this up. This is not the same color, obviously, as the background dark green, because this is going to be warmer because it's closest to us, okay? Plus, it's not in that deep shadowed area. It's not set back. So what is that? It's sap green, burnt umber, and a little bit of ultramarine blue, but it's slightly warmer, because I'm using sap green, not viridian green. And you could see the difference. You could see how warm it is. And that's what we want. And, you know, we have to think in terms of the atmosphere. And if we were actually on the other side of this pond and we were looking across, the colors are going to be more richer the closer they get to us. The further away, they're going to get a little, you know, a little bluer, a little cooler, sometimes a little lighter. But in here, you want it now, we really want to pull out all the stops as far as the chroma, the intensity of the color. Now remember, that shadow shape that we made just before, just 2 seconds earlier, we have to try to mimic those shapes to an extent, right? They don't have to be perfect. You know, you don't have to make, it's not a mirrored image, but it should reflect a general shape that we see above on land. Now we're painting the water. Now I'm going back over here just to accentuate those darks, and you can see now that it's nice and dark. I don't really have to go over this again. If I do, it's just for little detail. Now I sprayed the bottom there because I want these colors to blend a little bit more. So now I'm going in. Now notice when I paint, I'm not painting broad strokes. I'm dabbing in areas. So the idea here is like not to make your, you know, the more chaotic and abstracted your shapes are, especially outside in landscapes, the more real they're going to be. The more you sit down and trying to copy every little shape, that's like a recipe for disaster, because you're not looking at the big picture. You're not looking at the big shapes, right? You have to look at the big picture, right? That's the atmosphere. That's the feeling of a painting, not the detail. And a lot of people equate an over-detailed painting, which is fine, and they look beautiful, and I'm not putting them down. But when you want to get the essence of something, you have to look at the big things. You have to see the big shapes, right? The abstract. And when you do that, your painting is going to look more natural than if you try to detail it to death. Remember, it's the value structure, what we're doing right now. It's the lights and the darks and all the subtleties in between, placed in the right areas, right? Okay, there's always a little bit of that. You know, you got to make sure you're accurate in your values. That's what's going to create atmosphere and the sense of light in a painting, especially watercolor. I mean, let's face it, watercolor painting is probably the most atmospheric medium that shows bright light than any other medium does. I'm not saying oil can't, but watercolor does it more spontaneously. All right, so now what was this watercolor? Because here I am blabbering on. It's basically the same as we used in the trees, and actually the trees along the bank. So it's burnt umber, sap green, ultramarine blue. That's all it is. It's that green that I just put down. But we're going over it now because there's going to be some areas that are picking up a little bit more green. Now I'm drying it so I can just make it darker. And then we're going to work on the house. There's a little dry brushing there, as you can see. That's still the same wash I just described. Burnt umber, sap green, ultramarine blue. That's it. It's not the way background color. It's just the watercolor. Okay, the lake color. A little bit more shadow on the tree in there. Now here, I don't know if I probably did it so fast, but I did put a little water down right on the house. You see how soft those windows look? Well, you don't want them to be hard edged, so I just went back in and I just touched the middle with a little darker color. That darker color is just basically our go-to dark burnt umber and ultramarine blue. That's all it is. But so now we're seeing the little bit of the chimney is popping up there a little bit, and now some little rivulets, some little waves. Again, don't try to be so perfect, right? Break the line. When you use your, get one of your better pointed brushes and try to get an uneven line, right? That uneven line is going to be a wave. You don't want straight lines. Now here I break out the little straight edge razor blade and I put the telephone lines in. some little bubbles along the shoreline, little bubbles on the surface of the water. Now here I'm going back, lightening up just a little. I scrubbed a little bit of the house. I saw that there was a little warmth in that light, because that is dappled sunlight on the house. So I just added a tiny bit of yellow in there, just a tiny bit. All right, so there's the house. That's and I go back at the very end. You'll see that right even after I was going to photograph it, and when I photographed it, I looked at it and I noticed that the picture right, that part of the picture right part of the house, the shadow side, needed to get a little darker. The right side there. You'll see. I'll do that later. And I'm just adding more. I'm trying to see if there's any more color that I need to put in. Now remember, these paintings are done in probably less than 3 hours. So can we do it better? Yeah, it probably could. There's probably some areas that you can tighten up a little bit. But that's why in watercolor, what's the amazing thing is that, okay, it took us, let's say, 2 hours to paint this, right? If you do this again, it's only going to take you an hour and a half, maybe less, because you already know what you did. So you have an idea of how to approach it. So now, here, okay, so what I'm doing is I'm trying to take a picture of it. Now, I took a picture of it, then I realized, I looked at the photograph, and I said, you know what? That needed to be a little darker there. And I'm going to put a little bit of that same color into the shadowed house. So that's what's, sometimes you want to look at that. You want to look at your painting from a distance. You want to look at your painting from a phone. It's almost like a reduction glass that they used to use back in the day. I don't even know if you can get them anymore, but long story short, this is the final painting. As you can see, this one probably is closer to the original. The video colors are usually a little bit off. They usually washed out. But you can see here that you can see where the cadmium yellow is prominent, where the sap green is prominent, and you can see in those trees way in the back that blue, that blue-green is really a lot of cool colors. So we have Viridian and Ultramarine Blue. You have a lot of cool tone in the back, and that's setting that back. Even though it's green, those trees are the same trees that we see in the light, but they're not catching light at all, right? So you have to think in terms of, all right, they're in shadow. You have to be able to know and discern what green you need to use in what area. So, and then the water, now going back to that reflection of those dark shapes, you can see that the water is pretty dark, but and it's darker on a whole than the background, right? Because that's the reflection. So I probably could have gotten a little darker maybe on the water, on some of the bushes that are near the embankment, but it's okay. I think this is really all about the reflection, the fleeting light effect that crosses over. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I guess I'll see you next time. Have a great day, and see you later. Thanks for watching. Bye now.